My dad took his life on my 5th birthday. 3 years later, I found his handwritten letter. Mom told me it was an old goodbye note. But as I grew older, I started receiving frequent, oddly specific letters that made me question everything. In these letters, Dad would congratulate me on making it to my middle school graduation, for getting my driver's license. And on my 17th birthday, the letter mentioned Isla, my friend who I'd only met 2 months ago. I tried telling myself it was some kind of mistake, but deep down I knew something was up. I marched straight to my dad's best friend's house. They'd grown up in the same foster house, and if anyone would know the truth, it would be him. To what do I owe the pleasure? What is this? I interrupted him, holding up the letters that had been my family secret up until now. His face instantly drained of color. He didn't even read them, but somehow knew what they were. Your father. He knew you better than you think, he stammered before practically shoving me out the door. I couldn't stop thinking about it. So the next day after school, when I saw his car at the grocery store nearby, I waited around the corner. He came out of Aldi, except he wasn't carrying any groceries. Just an envelope. That's when I knew I had to follow him. I called an Uber instantly and told him to follow. 10 minutes later, I found myself at a storage unit on the edge of town, crouching behind a rusty container watching my dad's best friend work from afar. He was in that storage unit for so long that by the time he finally came out of it and drove away, I'd fully finished 2 Natasha Chamberlain podcast episodes. That's when I snuck in. The storage unit was still unlocked, probably because he was A, kinda dumb, and B, it hadn't expected a psycho beach to come snooping around. Inside the unit, boxes lined every wall. I opened the closest one and nearly dropped it. Hundreds of letters instantly spilled out, and these were all addressed to different girls. Natasha, Paige, Chloe, all written like they were from dead fathers. Then I spotted one that made my blood freeze. For Sophie, my name, 18th birthday. That was 3 weeks away. My fingers trembled as I opened it. It started off with normal, proud father stuff. Then, soon we can finally be together again. Follow the instructions. I started freaking out. He was actually planning to lure me somewhere. Where would he have taken me? And what would he do once we were alone? I was about to sneak out to just get some air until I saw the filing cabinet. Inside were folders filled with girls' photos. The photos didn't have names on them at first, but after reading the letters, I could match the physical appearance as described in the letters to their names. I pulled up Google and searched the names, and my blood went cold. Paige Wright, missing. Amanda Thompson, missing. All vanished right before turning 18. My 18th birthday was in 3 weeks. I grabbed everything I could carry and sped to Victor's house. You wrote these, I said, dumping the folders on his Kit Collins table. He didn't even deny it. Parents pay me to write them to grieving daughters who need comfort, but your mom never gave me a dime. His hands shook as he pulled out a ledger. Look at this, he said, showing me the payment records. Most parents only pay me for a year, maybe 2, but someone's been paying me monthly for 12 years to write to you. He showed me the pickup address where he collected his fee, Starfire Grief Center. I recognized it instantly. It was a therapy center I went to twice after Dad died. Wait, all these missing girls, did they go to Starfire too? He nodded, looking sick. They all disappeared right before their 18th birthdays, except for one, Natasha Collins, aged 19. There was an address crossed out in red pen on her file, but I could still make out Leng Books. After driving over 20 miles, I found her working at a bookstore 2 towns over. Natasha Collins? I asked. She nodded, scanning the book. This is going to sound crazy, but did you used to get letters from your dead father? Her face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. She shoved my book back at me. I think you should leave. Wait, I pulled out one of my dad's letters, hands shaking. I get them too. Every birthday since I was 8. She looked around the empty store, then grabbed my arm. A week before my 18th birthday, I got one saying Dad was waiting for me at the old Starfire building. Said he'd faked his death to protect me. I was actually going to go, but my mom found it first and freaked out. My blood ran cold. I left immediately, driving home in a panic. That night, a letter slipped under my door. 3 weeks before my birthday. I opened it with shaking hands. My dearest Sophie, I've waited so long for this. Midnight on your 18th birthday, come to the Starfire building. Come alone. I got ready to leave. Requested Reads is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. To leave to the police, but my hands froze on my phone. I couldn't just walk into a station and dump this on some random cop who might not believe me or might mess everything up. I needed someone who would actually listen and know what to do. I texted Jackson at 2 a.m. asking if he knew anyone in law enforcement we could trust, and he responded instantly saying the school resource officer was actually pretty cool and might point us in the right direction. I barely slept that night, just kept staring at the letter and thinking about Natasha almost going to that meeting. The next morning, I walked into school early and headed straight to the SRO's office before I could chicken out. She listened to my whole story for maybe 10 minutes, looking at the letters I brought, and then she picked up her phone without even asking if I was okay with it. She called someone named Barry and said she had a case he needed to hear about immediately. Within an hour, I was sitting in a coffee shop across from Detective Barry Holder, spreading letters and photos across the table between our drinks. He had kind eyes, but they got really serious when I explained about the missing girls and Victor and the 12 years of payments. He took notes on everything, asked detailed questions about exact dates and times, and promised this would stay between us until we had a solid plan. I felt this huge weight lift just having an actual detective believe me instead of thinking I was paranoid or crazy. 2 days later, Barry called and asked me to meet him at the same coffee shop. He pulled out his laptop and showed me security footage from the Aldi, and there was Victor walking out at exactly the time I remembered, carrying just an envelope and nothing else. Seeing it on screen made everything feel more real, like I wasn't making this up in my head. Barry said he was working on getting warrants, but needed to build the case carefully, so nothing got thrown out later. That afternoon, I was sitting in chemistry class when my phone buzzed with an Instagram DM from an account with 0 posts and no profile picture. The message just said, "Stop asking questions," and my heart started pounding, so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I screenshot it immediately and sent it to both Barry and Jackson, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone. Barry called me during lunch and said he traced the account to a burner email address, but couldn't get much further without a subpoena. He told me the threat itself was actually evidence that we were getting close to something, which somehow made me feel both safer and more scared at the same time. That evening, Barry picked me up in an unmarked car and drove me past the Starfire building. It sat in this industrial area outside town with a bunch of empty lots around it, looking way less welcoming than the photos on their website. We parked down the block and just watched for over an hour. A few regular-looking people came out around 6 p.m., probably normal clients who had no idea what was really going on inside. Then at 8 p.m., when the place should have been closed for the night, someone went in through a side door that I hadn't even noticed before. Barry made notes in this little notebook and said he'd come back with better surveillance equipment to see who was coming and going after hours. The whole thing felt surreal, like I was in some crime show instead of my actual life. I couldn't stop thinking about Natasha and how close she came to going to a meeting just like the one they wanted me to attend. The next day after school, I drove the 20 miles back to Leng Books and found her on her break in the back room. This time when I approached her, she didn't try to brush me off. She pulled out her phone and showed me the exact letter she got before her 18th birthday, and I felt sick reading it because the wording was almost identical to mine. It even had the same phrase, "We can finally be together again," that made my skin crawl. She told me she spent the last year wondering if she was a coward for not going, if maybe her dad really could have been alive somehow. I looked her right in the eyes and told her she wasn't a coward. She was a survivor, and the information she was giving me might help save other girls from whatever happened to Paige and Amanda. We exchanged numbers right there, and she made me promise to text her every single day, so she'd know I was safe. I promised and meant it, because talking to her made me realize how easily I could have been one of the missing girls if I hadn't gotten suspicious about the letters. Barry called me 2 days later with news that made my stomach flip. He'd interviewed Victor again, this time at the actual police station instead of his house, and Victor started slipping up about the payment schedules. Victor mentioned getting paid, like clockwork, every month for over a decade, which proved the payments for my letters never stopped even after all these years. Barry said Victor was getting scared now and might be willing to cooperate more if we pushed the right way. The storage facility manager came through with access logs showing Victor visited that unit at least 3 times before every girl's 18th birthday going back 5 years. Barry spread the logs out on his desk and showed me the pattern, and it was so clear and deliberate that I felt physically sick looking at it. But Barry said patterns were exactly what he needed to get a warrant from a judge. By the end of that day, he called me back saying he had a judge's signature to search the entire storage unit. The police search happened on a Tuesday morning while I was supposed to be sitting in English class. Barry texted me updates every 20 minutes, and I sat in the school bathroom stall reading them and trying not to cry. They recovered boxes and boxes of letter templates organized by girl's name, mailing schedules written in Victor's actual handwriting, and photo files that matched the pictures of the missing girls I'd seen before. I sat there on that toilet reading Barry's texts and crying with relief that I wasn't making this whole thing up, that there was real evidence now that other people could see. When I finally came out of the bathroom, my eyes were all red and puffy, but I didn't even care. Barry introduced me to Rachel Bennett the next day at the police station. She had short gray hair and this calm voice that made me feel instantly safe, like she'd seen everything before and nothing shocked her. She worked as a victim advocate with the DA's office and specialized in cases like mine. Rachel explained all my options without pressuring me toward any specific choice, which I really appreciated because everyone else kept telling me what I should do. She gave me her cell number written on her business card and said I could call 24/7 if I ever felt unsafe or just needed to talk. Having that card in my pocket made me feel less alone. Rachel set up a safety workshop just for me in a private room at the Victim Services Center. She taught me de-escalation tactics for if someone tried to corner me, code words I could use in emergencies that would sound normal to anyone listening, and how to trust my gut instincts about dangerous situations. We practiced scenarios where someone tried to isolate me or pressure me into going somewhere alone, and she showed me different ways to get out of those situations safely. By the end of the 2-hour session, I felt way more prepared, like I had actual tools instead of just fear and panic. Rachel made me practice the code words until I could work them naturally into conversation, and she gave me a small personal alarm to keep on my keychain. The next afternoon, Jackson came over with his laptop and we spread out all the scanned letter copies on my bedroom floor. He pulled up some software that could analyze email headers and digital footprints, and we started feeding the scanned images through his system. About 20 minutes in, he stopped scrolling and pointed at his screen, showing me a bunch of code I didn't really understand. He explained that all the letters had been printed at the same copy shop, some place called Quick Print Solutions that was only 3 blocks from Starfire. We pulled up a map on my phone and marked both locations, and suddenly the whole operation looked way more organized than I'd thought. Everything was kept tight in the same neighborhood, probably so whoever was running this could move between locations easily without drawing attention. I took screenshots of everything and texted them to Barry with a note about the print shop connection. He replied back within minutes saying he'd add it to his investigation list and would check if Victor had any connection to that business too. 2 days later, my neighbor Mrs. Chen knocked on our door holding her phone. She told Mom she had something weird on her security camera from a couple nights ago and thought we should see it. I came downstairs and she showed us footage of a dark sedan sitting near our mailbox around 2 a.m., just idling there for almost 10 minutes before driving away slowly. The angle wasn't perfect, but you could make out part of the license plate in one frame when the car turned. My hands shook as I asked Mrs. Chen to send me the video file, and the second it hit my phone, I forwarded it straight to Barry. I paced around the kitchen for the next hour, checking my phone every 30 seconds until Barry finally called back. His voice sounded serious when he told me he'd run the partial plate through police databases and got a hit. The car was registered to someone who worked at Starfire, which meant they'd been watching my house and knew where I lived. I felt sick knowing someone had been outside my home in the middle of the night, probably checking to see if I was following their instructions. Barry called me in for a meeting at the police station a few days after that. When I got there, he walked me into a conference room where a woman in a suit was waiting, and he introduced her as the district attorney. She had all our evidence spread out on the table in organized folders, and I sat there while they went through everything piece by piece. Barry explained the storage unit findings, the letter patterns, the missing girls, Victor's cooperation, the car surveillance footage, and the print shop connection. The DA listened carefully and took notes, asking questions about timelines and evidence chains. After about an hour, she leaned back in her chair and said they had enough for a warrant on Starfire itself, which made my heart jump. But then she said something that made my stomach flip. She wanted to consider a controlled operation where I actually kept the midnight meeting on my birthday, with police backup positioned around the building. The idea of walking into that place knowing what I knew made me want to throw up. But Barry explained it might be the only way to catch whoever was behind this actually trying to grab me. He said with just the evidence we had now, they might only get conspiracy charges that wouldn't stick as well. But if they caught someone in the act of attempted kidnapping, the case would be way stronger. I sat there staring at the table trying to process what they were asking me to do. That night, I knew I had to tell Mom everything properly this time. I called Rachel and asked if she could come over to help mediate the conversation, because last time Mom and I talked about this, it went badly. Rachel agreed and showed up an hour later with her calm presence that always made me feel safer. We all sat in the living room and I walked Mom through every single piece of evidence slowly and carefully. I showed her the letters, the photos of missing girls, Victor's ledger, the surveillance footage, the print shop connection, everything organized in chronological order. I watched her face change as she looked through it all, her expression shifting from skeptical to confused to absolutely horrified. When I finished explaining about the controlled operation idea, she just sat there silent for a long moment. Then she started crying and apologized for not believing me earlier, for thinking I was being paranoid or dramatic. She grabbed my hands and asked what she could do to help keep me safe, and I felt this huge relief that she finally understood how serious and real this all was. A week later, Barry called saying a local reporter named Zoe Riggs had contacted him asking questions about the storage unit search. Apparently, she'd been monitoring public records requests and noticed the warrant filing. Barry wanted to know if I was okay with him talking to press, and we spent an hour on the phone discussing whether media attention would help or hurt. I talked to Rachel about it too, and we decided that getting some information out there might actually warn other girls who could be targets. Barry met with Zoe and gave her limited details that wouldn't mess up the investigation, and she agreed to hold back anything that could compromise what we were building. 3 days later, her article came out in the local paper with a headline about predatory grief counseling scams targeting young women. She didn't name me or give specific details about Starfire, but she laid out the general pattern of fake letters from dead relatives being used to lure vulnerable people. I read it online and felt this weird mix of exposure and validation, like finally someone outside our small circle was acknowledging this was real and dangerous. The morning after Zoe's article published, Jackson texted me a link to Starfire's website. I clicked it and saw a new banner across the top announcing a temporary closure for facility updates. My stomach dropped because the timing was way too convenient. I immediately called Barry and he said he was already on it, pulling phone records from Starfire's business lines. He called me back 2 hours later and told me there'd been a bunch of calls between Starfire numbers and Victor's phone right after the article went live. Barry said they were scrambling and panicking, which meant we were getting close to exposing the whole thing. But he also warned me that scared people do unpredictable stuff, so I needed to be extra careful about my safety. He told me to stick to public places, always tell someone where I was going, and call him immediately if anything felt off. That afternoon, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up, and the voicemail that got left made my skin crawl. A woman's voice, smooth and caring, introduced herself as Alyssa Harrington from Starfire. She said she'd heard I might be interested in grief counseling services and wanted to offer me a private session at a special discounted rate. The way she talked sounded so kind and understanding, but knowing everything I knew made it feel gross and predatory. I saved the voicemail and drove straight to Barry's office, where Rachel was already waiting for another meeting. I played them the message and watched their faces get serious. Rachel said the language Alyssa used was way too similar to the patterns in the letters to be random, and Barry agreed the timing right after their closure announcement was suspicious. They both thought this was a direct attempt to make contact with me, now that their normal operation was falling apart. Rachel spent the next hour coaching me through making a recorded phone call back to Alyssa. She gave me a script of innocent questions to ask while listening for specific phrases that might connect to the letters. My hands were sweating, so bad I could barely hold my phone as I dialed the number from the voicemail. Alyssa answered on the second ring with that same smooth voice, and I tried to sound curious rather than terrified. I asked about her counseling approach and what kind of services she offered, and she talked about helping people reconnect with lost loved ones and finding closure. Then she used the exact phrase that had been in my lure letter, talking about how grief counseling could help me feel like my dad and I were together again. Barry was sitting across from me and gave me a thumbs up when he heard it, mouthing that I was doing great. I managed to finish the call without my voice shaking too much, thanking Alyssa and saying I'd think about scheduling something. The second I hung up, I felt like I needed to shower. Barry took the recording straight to the DA that same day, along with all our other evidence. I waited at home trying to distract myself with homework, but mostly just staring at my phone. Finally, around 8 p.m., Barry called and said the DA had agreed to greenlight the controlled meeting operation if we could make the safety plan completely solid. He explained what that meant in detail, that I would actually go to Starfire at midnight on my birthday, wearing a wire with police positioned all around the building and in unmarked cars. They'd have eyes on me the whole time and could move in within seconds if anything went wrong. My stomach was doing flips as he talked through the plan, but I knew this might be the only real chance to stop whoever was behind this, and maybe get answers about what happened to those missing girls. Barry said we'd do multiple practice runs and safety drills before my birthday, so I'd know exactly what to do in any situation. When I told Mom about the final decision to do the controlled operation, we had the biggest fight we'd ever had. She completely lost it, yelling that they should just arrest everyone now based on what we already had and not put me in danger. I tried to explain what Barry had told me about how without catching someone actually trying to grab me, the charges might not stick, and these people could get away with it. Mom said she didn't care about charges sticking. She cared about me being safe, and nothing was worth risking my life. We went back and forth for over an hour, both of us crying and frustrated. Finally, I told her I was doing this with or without her permission because I was almost 18, and those other girls deserved justice. She looked at me for a long time and then said, if I was really going through with it, she was going to be in the command vehicle with Barry the whole time so she could see and hear everything that was happening. Barry agreed to that arrangement when I called him, and Mom made me promise I'd follow every single safety protocol exactly as instructed. I promised, even though the whole thing made me want to throw up every time I thought about it. The next morning, I went straight to Barry instead of doing anything stupid on my own. He met me at the police station and took me to a small room in the back where he pulled out what looked like a normal jacket button, except it had tiny wires coming off the back. He explained how the recording device worked and made me practice putting the jacket on and off until the button sat in exactly the right spot to pick up voices clearly. We tested it by having me walk around the room while he listened from his desk, adjusting the volume until he could hear me breathing even when I whispered. Then we moved on to the safe word, which Barry said needed to sound natural in conversation, so whoever I was meeting wouldn't realize I was calling for help. We settled on birthday candles because it made sense to mention on my actual birthday, and Barry made me practice working it into different sentences until it felt normal coming out of my mouth. After that, he pulled out a map of the area around Starfire and walked me through the extraction plan, showing me exactly where officers would be positioned and which direction I should run if things went bad. He made me repeat the whole plan 5 times, pointing to each position on the map and explaining what I'd do at each step, until I could recite it perfectly, even when he tested me by asking random questions to throw me off. 2 days later, Barry called to tell me Victor's lawyer had sent over a letter offering cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. Victor claimed he was just writing letters for money and had no idea anyone was planning to actually grab these girls, that he thought it was all just grief counseling stuff. Barry said Victor's story kept changing every time they talked to him, first saying he didn't know anything, then admitting he suspected something, then claiming he tried to stop it but was scared. I asked if we should deal with Victor now, but Barry said no. We'd handle him after we caught whoever was running the operation at Starfire, because Victor was small compared to them. He explained that Victor would probably end up testifying against the others to save himself, which made me feel sick, but I understood it was how these things worked. That night, I sat at my desk and pulled out a blank piece of paper, needing to write something just for myself that I'd never send to anyone. I I started writing about Dad, about the real memories I had of him teaching me to ride a bike, and making pancakes on Saturday mornings, and how the fake letters had stolen